Welcome everybody to another episode of Tommy's Outdoors podcast. And today with me, Suzanne Baughman. How are you, Suzanne?
I'm doing great.
Great to have you
Always
here.
am.
Great to have you here. Thank you for accepting invite to the podcast.
I'm thrilled to be here.
All right. Thank you very much. So you're a known blogger and hill walker, and you're also running hill walking tours.
Yes, and photography tours as well.
That's awesome. Maybe I'm just gonna let you speak about yourself, and you're gonna tell our listeners everything that you do. And
Okay. Well, I guess the first obvious thing is I'm not Irish from birth. I am an Irish citizen, but I'm an American and lived mostly in Austin, Texas. Grew up in the Northeast, moved to Austin, Texas when I was about 30. So I spent decades in Austin, which is a real outdoors kind of a place.
that was on my mind.
Yeah.
Like I would maybe.
Fabulous running, cycling. You know, the hill country of Texas is right near there. It's not a flat desert like some parts of Texas. It's really beautiful and lots of hills to walk around on. And I guess about 4 years ago, I was on vacation, traveling around through Europe and doing some hiking and camping, and ended up in Ireland. And while I was here in Killarney, I met a man at the hostel, Neptune's Hostel, and I'm now married to him.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's
I
awesome.
now live in Ireland, which was not what I was expecting when I went on a 5-week trip to Ireland.
Wow. Yeah. So I suppose this is kind of like everybody kind of hears that I'm not, Irish either, and I also live in Kerry. I'm not married yet, but I love it. Tell me what you love so much about Kerry, because I mean, like,
Where to start?
Clearly, Kerry has a special place.
Oh, it really does. There's so much about Kerry. One time, an American tourist that I was chatting with in Waterville, where I live, said, "So what do you do all day besides watch television?"
Oh my God!
And I said, "What?"
I don't have a TV. I don't even have
I said,
a TV.
"Television?" I said, "Sometimes I walk out the door before I have my morning coffee and just go for a little stroll. And now I have to keep food in my pocket because I might be gone for 5 or 6 hours because it's so pretty. You don't want to go back inside." Some
awesome.
days are just absolutely gorgeous. It's a beautiful place. There's hills, there's walking, there's fresh air.
I got to ask you that question, sir, because you said like it's so fabulous, and some days are so fabulous, but this is like 3 of these days in a year.
Nonsense.
Maybe it's like raining 300 days in a year. So.
Well, we say this after Saturday, which was like the worst rainy day like in the last year.
Yeah.
But really, if you think about it, not every day, even when it rains, it's not raining all day. So it rains and then it clears up, and then it rains and then it clears up. So there'd be showers. And I think that's the one tip I'd say to someone coming from overseas, especially, just bring good rain gear. Bring rain pants that are golfer. They don't have to be hill country hiking pants. Mm-hmm. Get golf pants, something that's waterproof, because what you want is something that'll just protect you for, a shower that might last 20 minutes. And then you'll have an hour and a half of clear weather, and then another shower that lasts 30 minutes.
You know what I'm finding the most difficult is the wind. I don't mind the rain, but especially in the coastal areas, the wind is that thing that makes you chill.
Yep.
And this I find it, and even sometimes, and because you're cycling a lot, and I'm into cycling as well, and like sometimes the day otherwise would be beautiful, but because of the
and
wind
it's buffeting you, it's kind of go
yes.
boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. The one thing I learned here, after 55 years of never noticing the weather map, I now know what the H means and the L means, the high and the low. I know what that means. We are always praying for the H.
Yeah.
We want the high because that brings clear weather and still weather.
Yeah.
And so I know that a high is coming and it's hanging off over Spain, waiting to hit. And then you just hold your breath that it's going to come, because then you'll have 3 or 4 days of really calm weather.
Yeah, and then you see over Atlantic this L that is moving.
And you just hope that the H buffers it away.
Or they're gonna miss you. Okay, so you're just tough enough. You're just not paying attention to it.
Yeah, I mean, the wind is dangerous. I actually have my low-level walking guide certification from OPW, Office of Public Works. And when we had the test, it was classroom days and then an actual hill walk that we had to go with the instructor.
Yeah.
And the classroom day was sunny and beautiful and calm, and we were in a classroom. Right. It was really depressing. Yeah. And then when we had the walk,
of course,
gale force winds. And we walked at Bolus Head, which is one of the peninsulas down near Waterville, near Ballinskelligs Bay. And at one point, the instructor, who has climbed in Nepal and climbed in the Alps, and he's very experienced, he was practically hanging onto the grass, laying on the ground saying, I guess this is a good time to tell you that if a man can't stand up, it's probably over 80 kilometers an hour. And we were just dying. It was the wind was killing us. Oh my God. But I'll tell you one thing, you have to be careful. Bolus Head, for specifics, there's a loop walk around Bolus Head. There is a path, but there's actually an alternate path because the one main path is very close to the edge.
Yeah.
And you just can't do that on a day when there's 80-mile-an-hour winds. You just can't. And so most of those kind of walks in Ireland would have another walk, maybe, I'd say 15 meters. Yeah. That was in away from the sea, so you could also walk up that same hill. Maybe not as used a trail, but you'd be able to walk up that trail and be safe because you could be blown off the side of Bolus Head in a big wind.
And this is the same story with cycling when the wind is too strong. And I remember a few years ago with my friends, we were looking at what cycle path we take and where we're going to cycle. And we were looking at the wind direction and try to pick up the path that if the wind going to blow us, it's going to blow us into the ditch rather than on the side and into the road under the car.
After a 60-foot drop.
Yeah. And I was like, no, we probably should stay at home because it's no fun. You can get blown, under the car. And
the one thing I see is as you start to get to know the area a little bit, which is why I think if someone comes as a tourist, they should get a guide, because there's a lot of tips you can get from the guide. Like if it's a really windy day near where I live, you wouldn't do the coastal cycle. Yeah. But there's plenty of inland cycles that wouldn't have that same wind when it's coming from the west. Yeah. So you could go in through, say, Inny Tavern, Blacasheen. There's a loop that goes through Cara Lake, and then that's not as windy because you're not on the coast anymore. Yeah. So if you had a guide that would say, this is not the day to go on the coast road. Nothing beats local knowledge, for sure. Exactly.
And they're obviously, you can be that guide, right?
That's exactly right.
What would be the best way for people to get in touch with you if they want to?
Well, I'm on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram as Today in Ireland. And I also have a website, todayinireland.com. And mostly on that website, it's just photographs. I take photos, and that's sort of my background. I love photography. When I first moved here...
Guys, go there now and check all the photos. They're awesome.
You came here as an EU citizen, so you could work the first day. Yeah. But I came as an American, so I wasn't allowed to work.
Oh, really?
Oh, no. Oh. We can't get a working visa as easy as someone from the EU. And so... my first 2 years here, while I was in the process of getting citizenship, because my grandparents were born in the 1890s. Okay. And since my grandparents were born here
in Ireland.
So
you're Irish.
Yeah, half.
Yeah, very good.
And so I got citizenship through my grandparents.
I can't climb Ireland.
I've got 2 passports, as a matter of fact, American and Irish. But the interesting thing is, as I traveled around, I couldn't work. Yeah. I mean, it just wasn't allowed to. So I took pictures and tweeted and posted about how beautiful this was.
Is that how it started?
Yeah, that's how it started. All right. So today in Ireland, people say, what are you doing while you're there? Well, today I did this hill walk, and today I did this bicycle ride, and today I went to a horse race on the beach in Glen Bay or whatever.
That's fantastic.
So that's how I started. So there's lots of pictures on todayinireland.com. And it just, one whole section is just on the Ring of Kerry and the Skellig Coast area that just shows people, what's here. Yeah. A lot of the hill walking. I took pictures for the hill walking club and have great pictures. You can see people in action on the hills. Yeah. And
how the outdoors culture, let's say in Ireland and Kerry, differs from what you know from Texas, how does it compare?
Well, it's interesting. I think
And obviously, are you missing the sun of Texas?
Oh, I
and
do on occasion.
Nice weather.
Oh, yes. Like in February when the wind is almost blowing the windows out of the side of the house. I'm thinking about Texas. But I just love it here so much. You know, it's interesting. Ireland's known for green fields and,
Yeah.
you know, beautiful green fields. And they all talk about 40 Shades of Green. In the winter, it's not so green, but it's beautiful burgundy
Yeah.
and gray and tan and silver and blacks. And the colors in the wintertime, I think, are more beautiful than the green.
Yeah.
And another thing about winter that some people don't think about is, you know how on the edges of the roads you have those hedges that are all
Yeah.
thick?
Yes.
And then there's leaves on the trees. So you can't see over a hedge in the summertime. You can't see the
That's-
mountain that's in the distance.
That's true.
But in the wintertime, those have all fallen
true.
off. And you can see a lot more about what's around
Yeah.
in the winter.
That's true. That's very true. So just go back to my question. Is how it differs, like in terms of activities and cycling? Is it, you would say it's more opportunities, less opportunities, or is it like just people who are into outdoors they're taking what they have in
Well, I
an
think
area? And
the whole country really, the government included, they're trying to get more people outside for health reasons. And so there is a lot of people that do go bicycle riding, do go walking, that you would maybe look at and think, oh, they're not a bicycle rider. But they are. You know, they don't, in Texas where I used to live, the bicycle riders were all spandex tights and spandex shirts and skinny and,
Kitted
you know,
out.
went out, 100 miles on a weekend. And here there's a lot of people that they might go 20 miles and that's a big deal for them.
Yeah.
But they're out there on their bikes doing the cycling.
Yeah, and like Ring of Kerry, on one of the previous episodes of a podcast, we were talking with my friend Donica about Ring of Kerry cycle, and how you have massive amounts of people, and for some of them
Like
it's
9,000.
like,
Yeah.
and it's like in just incomprehensible distance, like we're doing like 160 kilometers, and then you say the guys, like you said, like doing 160, they're doing every day of
They
the
do
week.
it twice on the
Yeah,
day
or
to
they do
some
it twice.
people.
Yes, exactly. But I think that this is what's great, that you see all these people who are training hard the whole year, and they just like, yes, we did it.
And the alternative to those people that train hard all year and then do it and it's the one time is you can get a good used bike after the Ring of Kerry's over.
Yeah. Oh, yes, that's true.
Because some people do the Ring of Kerry and say, I'm never getting on that bike
I'm
again.
done with it. It's a ticked off the bucket list, and I'm never gonna.
That's exactly right.
And you obviously don't.
Well, I had a great experience at that. I didn't ride it this year,
Yeah.
but I stopped in Glen Bay and I was just taking pictures as people were coming down a little hill and there were roses in the background in a ruin of a church, and it was a great spot.
Great.
And someone that knew me saw me.
Uh-huh.
And so I was facing the bicycle rider. She started yelling, Susan, Susan, Susan. And she was going by me, so I didn't even turn around.
Uh-huh.
And then all of a sudden I heard this, and I looked behind me and she is leaned back to say, hi, Susan, and like wave at me. And so she hit the curb.
No.
And luckily we'd had a lot of rain that week, so it was a really soft, gushy piece of ground. And she hit her head. There was grass coming out of the edge of her helmet, and she was okay. But I just thought, I
Safety
never thought
first,
she'd
people.
like turn around and like try and sign.
Yeah, always look where you're cycling.
Exactly.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. What's your thing about Ring of Kerry? Are they just like a victim of their own popularity? Because I know that there are a lot of people kind of were very upset, especially, was it last year? Was it year? Yeah, it was not this year. It was last year, when they do that, like a drawing or raffle.
A raffle, yeah, because they're
whatever.
limiting the number of people.
Yeah, but they kind of changed that this year again. And
Well, they had less numbers, if I understand correctly, this year than last year. But it's interesting because I actually was talking to some business people this morning who own a pub that serves food, that's a restaurant on the Ring of Kerry,
Yeah.
and said they make almost no money. That it is such a busy day with bicycles, 9,000 bicycles on
But
the
who's
road.
making no money? The charities, or these
No,
people?
the people who have businesses,
okay,
because there's no business being done down on the rest of the Ring of Kerry. That there's very few people spending money because there's 9,000 bikes on the road. They're not driving the Ring of Kerry. They're not going to visit their friends. They're not having
right.
lunch with their
That's
neighbor.
very interesting.
So she said the day before, over 1,000. The day after, over 1,000 she'll make. And on the Ring of Kerry day, she makes almost nothing. And they want it to be moved into the off season, May or October.
Right, that's
when
very interesting because
yeah.
your traditional thinking was like, oh, this is this big event which is gonna draw a lot
And it's
of people.
only really
and
drawing
it's
people
good
to
for
Killarney.
It's only drawing people to Killarney.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they just busy cycling.
Yep.
They're not stopping.
And it's interesting because there's another cycle ride that's wonderful cycle ride called the Ring of Barra.
Ring of Barra.
And I volunteered at it. I'm in civil defense, and so I volunteered doing first aid. They had 3 starts.
Oh.
At the Ring of Barra. So they had people spend the night in 3 different villages.
Okay.
And so that
which
brought
kind of
business to all
the...
3. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So a real different mindset.
There it is. Very, very interesting point. Very
now
interesting.
someone from Killarney will be after me for saying that.
No, they won't.
It's all my opinion.
That's of course, and we are entitled to our opinion. Yeah, that's very interesting. I thought that that the Ring of Barra actually benefited a lot from people turning their back into Ring of Kerry, because there's a lot of, and then kind of Ring of Barra become this big event, which I think
I don't think it ever can get too big though. It's just not a big enough road. The road's smaller, so they'll never have 9,000 people do it. They just wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, unless people wanted to. Was it not precisely the problem with Ring of Kerry? Like too many people wanted to get there.
Yeah.
And then
but it's interesting. I talked to some tourists who had done both,
mm-hmm.
and they were from, I think they were from New York, mm-hmm. but they said that they were at both, and they said that they really preferred the Ring of Barra. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it was a brutally hot day the day they did it. I don't know how the sunburns people had coming back, but they liked it better because they felt that the hotel they were in for the Ring of Barra mm-hmm. was more welcoming to the event, because when they woke up at 4 a.m., their hotel was serving breakfast. The entire restaurant was open as if it was 10 a.m. Well, and they said they didn't get that in Killarney, right. where they were. Now, it could be just the hotel they had been in Killarney.
All right. That's interesting. That's interesting.
But it is a charity, ride.
Yeah.
And I spent so much money on food, beverage, bed and breakfast the night before and the night of, that I just said, well, I could give an extra 200 euros to the charity.
Yeah.
Rather than do. And plus I cycle that road, at least twice a month back and forth to Killarney. So
yeah.
I've done
it.
And
that's I suppose the main point of this is charity event, and they're even very specific. It's not sportive, it's not race, it's not anything like that. It's a charity event, people.
Yep. Raised a lot of money for Dairynan Inshore Rescue last year, and Valencia Hospital. And
I wonder if those people who are complaining that they're not getting business on the day of Ring of Kerry shouldn't just get in a game and raise some money for charity on that day as well.
Yeah, but if you look at it some ways, in Ireland, at least in the small villages and the outskirts, is a real seasonal business. I mean, even the places that are open 12 months a year, their summers bring them through the winter. And she said what she loses in the one day of the Ring of Kerry is what she would make in a week in the winter.
Yeah. But I suppose that's in general in tourism business, right? It's very seasonal, unless you're in a place when you're lucky enough to have a weather and tourists all the time.
But then, if we did have great weather and great sun and all that kind of stuff on Kerry, you know what we'd also have? We'd have concrete hotels on every beach.
Yeah,
and we don't want that.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be so green if we have so that rain has a purpose.
Exactly.
That's why it's so green.
Makes it so we have better scenery.
And that's that's very interesting point, because you hear about the issues, like for example in Barcelona, but also in many other places where actually locals are turning against tourists.
Like Ibiza, I just heard today about Ibiza having protests and trying to limit the number of tourists that can go to Ibiza during the season.
Yeah, and this is happening more and more in many more. Traditional thinking is like, oh, locals love it because tourists brings money and all that. But it turns out that there's too much is always bad, and then people say like, "Whoa, it's like, what are these tourists are doing here?" And I know that on the other podcast, I have my friend who lives in Barcelona, and we had this conversation, how to be like a local in Barcelona and what to do to avoid the crowd and kind of see what you really get to see,
Yep.
rather than go when everybody goes and he says like, come in winter, wear a scarf, and like when it's colder, and then don't do these things, because really that the local
carry a map.
Yeah. So the local people are turning against, because like, oh, it's too much. Because then on the other hand, the tourists are, almost like thinking that the whole place should be for them, to serve them, and they're, and there are people just living there, just like,
Trying to get to work in the morning.
Exactly.
Not happy about the traffic.
Exactly. Do you see any signs of that in Kerry? Or is it too so small and not that
I think at some point it's not so much that they're against the tourists that they're there. I think the real interesting thing is I think people are just disappointed that the tourists aren't really seeing what's there, because the tourists are zooming through. The average one comes in on a bus tour and does the Ring of Kerry in one afternoon, or they are in a car and they do it in one day.
But I suppose that's a really problem.
No, but if you look at Lonely Planet, which is like one of the best guidebooks ever, if you go to the Lonely Planet book on drives, it has the Ring of Kerry as a 4-day drive, because there's so much to do. And the average person's just looking out the window of the bus. And I think the people that live on it are very disappointed for them. Because they realize that there's, just in Waterville alone, there's standing stones, there's a stone circle fort, there's an abbey ruin from like the 6th or 8th century that's on an island you have to take a little boat to, but it's easy to do. There's so many things just in Waterville. Or Kersavine. There's ring forts that go from Derrynan, Kersavine, all along that southwest coast. There's big ring forts. And most people see one, and it's the perfect one. They don't see the ruins. They don't see the picturesque ones. There's a castle ruin on the beach that's probably 3 kilometers from the Ring of Kerry Road. And it's on the road, but it's just 3 kilometers off the main road. 90% of the people never see it.
It's a general problem that people are going in. It's like, okay, tick, 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 tick. I'm here. I need to do this, and it's like, and I'm only, like you said, I'm for a week, so I have these 3 things today and these 3 things tomorrow, and like it's like, well,
it's interesting.
Where's your experience? You kind of just breathe in and just experience the thing and kind of have a quiet moment to yourself.
Well, my first trip to Ireland was 2003, and I ran the Dublin Marathon, and it was not a great experience. It was my first marathon, so I'd never done one.
First ever.
And
you decided to do it in Ireland.
I wanted to do it someplace overseas because I knew if I just did it in my backyard and did it in Austin, it wouldn't be as special. So I wanted to do it special. I might do one and never do another. That was my theory.
Okay. That's interesting, because I would imagine you would rather do the one close to your home. Just to
I
have
wanted
this,
it to be special.
New
So I ended up going from Austin, Texas to Ireland, and Aer Lingus went on strike the day that I went.
Oh, awesome.
So it took 27 hours to get to Ireland. So instead of having that whole day to recuperate and then pick up our packets and all the rest, we had to basically land, run over to packet pickup, go to the hotel, fall asleep, get up. Well, when we were in a small little village on the outskirts of Dublin, it turned out they didn't have any restaurants open by the time we got back. So all I had the night before my first marathon was 2 slices of white bread and a piece of cheese. That's my dinner. Okay. So my marathon was not good. I was sore.
Carb loading.
It was terrible. And the funny thing was when we asked for menus when we got to the pub, the guy said, "You're not from around here, are you?" And I said, "No, we're tourists." And he goes, "Yeah, we don't sell for food in pubs." And so, and I kind of burst into tears. I'm like, "Oh, I'm running the marathon." And he said, "Okay, let me get you something from the kitchen." And he got me a cheese sandwich. But so I wasn't feeling good. My legs were really sore. I was hurting. So what I did was I spent 9 nights in the same bed and breakfast.
All right.
And had a fabulous holiday.
Okay.
Because I took the train. Yeah. Because I just couldn't walk and couldn't drive. Just driving a stick shift would have just killed my legs. I was really hurting. So what I did was I went on the train, the great train system they have in Dublin, commuter train system. Very few of the tourists even know about it. Yeah. So I went to Howth for lunch, and I'd be able to drink wine at lunch or a beer because I wasn't driving. And we went to Howth one day and Dunleary one day, and
so it ended up, forget about the marathon, but everything that happened after.
It was just great because we didn't go in the car. And I tell people, I say, when you go on holiday in Ireland, stop going to a different place every day. Mm-hmm. Spend 3 or 4 nights in one place, and then 3 or 4 nights in another place, and that's it. Because you can't see everything, so you might as well enjoy what you're seeing.
Yeah, that's interesting because, I kind of thinking about my approach to visiting different places, and I, however strange that may sound, I don't like visit place to see things. Let's go to Barcelona. Why we go there? Oh, to see it. Like, I can see the photos. I need to do something. Mm-hmm. I need to. So I'm gonna.
Perfect.
I'm going to Spain to not see River Ebro. I want to catch a big catfish from River Ebro, mm-hmm. or I don't want to just go to France to see the mountain. I want to cycle up that mountain. So I have to have something to do there.
Yeah, you want to experience it.
Experience it rather than like, oh yeah, I saw it. Oh, so that's how it.
Yeah, works. I saw the Alps.
Yeah, exactly.
I went hiking in the Alps. That kind of thing.
Yeah. You can just look at.
And that's it. It's a lot of the Americans, and I say this as an American, the Americans come over and they all want to do Dublin, Galway, Cork, Ring of Kerry, Dingle, Waterford.
Because for you guys, Ireland is so small.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to see it all in one day.
Oh, and then they get here and they're rushing. I do couch surfing. Uh-huh. Do you know what couch surfing is?
No, tell our listeners.
So couch surfing is when you stay with strangers all over the world and you host strangers at your home all over the world, and it's free. So you're not allowed to charge, and it's about sharing your culture with your guest. It's not about a free hotel room. It's not about a free place to stay. It's really about taking the time to show them around. Mm-hmm. And so I have a minimum of 2 nights because people were driving, coming at 10 p.m. Mm-hmm. And then the bus in Waterville leaves at 7, and so they'd either leave on the 7 a.m. bus or they'd drive away at 8:30. Yeah. And I just said, I'm not a free hotel room. You have to stay here 2 days and see this village.
So you're enjoying that a lot. You're enjoying sharing that experience.
I had a French girl this past weekend who was about 22 years old, and she stayed for 2 nights, and it was culture night here in Ireland. So we went up to an artist's residence village, an old famine village in Ballinskelligs, and people were telling stories about people who had emigrated in the 1800s, 1900s. We had music and fire. There was no electricity in the building, so it was all candlelight and fire.
That's pretty cool.
And it was just a fabulous experience. And that's the kind of thing couch surfing can bring.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Listen, let's talk about a little bit of hill walking.
Yes.
And tell us about something hill walking.
Well, I think the most important thing, depending on where you're from, the most important thing to know is that when someone says, let's go for a walk, it's not a walk. It's a hike.
Yeah.
And they use that phrase hill walking and walking. So and it just sounds so tame.
For someone who is not a native English speaker, please explain the difference between walk and hike.
Well, a friend of mine was staying in our village, and I said to her, oh, a whole bunch of us are going for a walk on Wednesday night. Do you want to go? And she said yes. So we all show up, and she's there wearing running shoes.
It's a walk, right?
And I said, I thought, we're like going hill walking, right? And she said, well, yeah. And I said, but I know you have boots. How come you're not wearing them? Oh, do we need boots? Are we going for a hike? And I said, well, we're going for a hill walk, and that's a hike.
Oh, okay.
And she got muddy, and her shoes were drenched when she got back, because hill walking can be scrambling over boulders and going over wet, mucky fields. And especially if it's rained in the last few days, it's muddy.
So
it's a walk, but in America, we would call it a hike.
It's really difficult.
It can be, absolutely.
It's just difficult. The biggest difference for me, because back in the days in Poland, I was doing a lot of hill walks or hikes in the mountains, and the biggest difference here was like, oh, there's no trail here. I was the kind of like, you see, oh, there's all this trail, and yeah, all right, you might have a boulders and muck and whatever, or you may, but there's always an arrow, and you go there, and you go whatever, and you know where to go.
Yeah, sometimes you really have to look for those arrows, though.
Yes, but still, you have
there's direction.
You're taking comfort from the fact that knowing that arrow is there somewhere. Well, the first time, I tried to go up the hill, other than Brandon, which is obviously so popular that there is a trail. It's like there's no trail. So I looked up on the website. There's a website called Mountain Views, I believe. So I looked up the trail, and I downloaded the track on my GPS, and I'm walking, and it's like there's supposed to be path here somewhere, and it's nowhere there. It's like, okay, I'm gonna try go that direction and find something, and maybe half an hour in, I was like, no, there's no trail here.
Not even a sheep trail?
No, you just go through the bushes. Like, okay, so that is the difference. So that was, like a first of those walks. It was probably the toughest ever, because I was just not ready.
And plus, you're also sort of unsure at that point if you're going the right way, and you're thinking, am I doing this right? Am I in the right place?
Yeah, I couldn't believe that there is no trail. And it was like, you're not used to that. And you're just like, geez, what am I doing here?
Well, that's the first time I climbed Carrauntoohil, which is the highest mountain in Ireland. I went with a group, and they do it every bank holiday Saturday in August. Yeah. They'd done it 26 years in a row.
Whoa.
And I went with them, and it was a gorgeous day. Absolutely gorgeous. Well, we get to one section of the trail, and do you know the expression shale? It's like gray stones that are sort of just, they slide. When you step on them, they slide. You step, they slide. There's this one section that's shale, and I said, well, where's the trail? And they said, oh, no, you just have to go end up there, and they pointed to a spot. So some people were 8 feet above me. Some people were 8 feet below me. Yeah. Some people were 20 feet away. I mean, people just climbed and scrambled wherever they could to get to that final point. I thought, you got to be kidding. There's no trail. Just like
I thought that on Carrauntoohil there will be a trail.
Well, there's more than one way up.
Oh, okay.
So it depends on which way. I guess maybe the other way, like Devil's Ladder, they might actually have a trail the whole way. But the way we went, there was this slidey part of the hill, and I just thought, I don't want to be at the bottom of this because there's other people above me moving little rocks.
Yeah, and you got to be careful. You got to kind of, what I know is you got to observe the vegetation, because then, on my way down, and actually way down is way more tricky.
Oh, yeah.
Because you don't see really when you're going, because the gradient of the hill, you don't see where you're going. And I went to the part where there's like a river flowing down. And I, in my naivety, said like, I'm gonna get down to the river, and then I'm gonna, hike down through that river. It's gonna be easier. So obviously, once I get down there, there's no way I'm gonna do this. So I ended up kind of hiking on the edges of the river, which are very steep.
Oh yeah.
In a like, in places shoulder deep vegetation. It was like terrible. It took me several hours just to move, meters. It's like, no. You gotta see what's the vegetation, what's the type of vegetation. So next time I took my binos and it was looking like, okay, it looks like I can go there, and no, I'm not going over there because I.
Well, I've got a great story about going downhill and how bad downhill can be. So I was there's a group of friends that go out once a week and just go out walking together. It's not really a club or anything, and we were all walking, and I'm usually last because I'm taking photographs and getting pictures of them going up the hill and things like that. So I'm always last. So they all climb over a fence, and then there's a ditch. So they have to go climb over the fence and then sort of jump over this ditch, and everyone's on the other side. So I come up to the fence, and I kind of looked around, and they said, climb it, stand on that little edge, and then jump over the ditch to us. And I just was like, jump over the ditch? Are you crazy? And I'm thinking, can I jump this? And so I climbed over the fence. I'm standing on the fence little bump. And they're going, jump it, jump it, jump it, jump it. And there's like, 20 people looking at me. And I'm thinking, I'm going to just fall on my face. There's no way I'm jumping this. So I said, I think I'll step down into the ditch. So I put my hand out, held the postman's hand, stepped down with my left foot. And the ditch looked like it was about 1.5 feet deep, but it was full of grass.
Oh,
and
right.
what it was it was about 3 feet deep.
Right.
So I went down really hard, and this pop as my soleus muscle popped off the back of my calf.
Oh my God.
And it popped, and I like jumped and fell over and started screaming. And the postman said to me the next day, I think that's the first time I've heard you curse.
I'm not surprised.
And I was like wreathing in pain, and I was
you get out of there?
screaming. Well, right when it happened, the girl whose parents have the farm next door, she just turned around and ran and went and got the truck and got her truck as far up the hill as she could.
Okay.
And they just tried to help me. But I had a boot. I had to wear a boot on my ankle and on my leg for, gosh, I think it was 6 weeks. I mean, it was horrible. Jeez. And it's because if I had jumped it and fallen on my face, I'd probably been okay.
Yeah.
But embarrassed. Yeah. Instead I hurt myself. But that's it. Now when I see a hole, I make sure, like with my stick and everything else, I see how deep is that hole.
But I suppose it's better to get injured this way than wearing high heels on the tarmac, and you're.
Well, I don't know. It depends on what you're doing in the high heels, I guess.
Does it happen very often that people get injured while hill walking?
Well, there's certainly it certainly happens. I mean, people die when they're hill walking. Someone died on Mount Brandon just about 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a man, and I don't know what happened.
Okay.
But he called his wife at around 3:00 on Saturday and said he was lost.
On Mount Brandon.
Mm-hmm.
Was it what was the weather like?
I think it was gray, but it wasn't miserable. He just was lost. He was by himself.
Yeah.
And he got lost. And when they found him, he had died. Now I don't know if he had a heart attack or if he fell. I don't know.
Right.
But people do die. And we have an organization here in Kerry called Kerry Mountain Rescue.
Yes.
And I'm not sure if it's 100% volunteer, but at least most of them would be volunteers. And when somebody gets lost in the hills, they send for Kerry Mountain Rescue. And those people are trained to climb at night in bad weather. But, I mean, it's really interesting. I was talking to someone who runs a hotel here in the town, and he told me that he came into his front desk one day, and the girl at the front desk was arguing with one of the customers. Mm-hmm. And he was thinking, this can't be good, that they're having an argument. And the customer is wearing shorts and a T-shirt and had a water bottle in his hand. And so he came over and says, what's going on? What's all the excitement about? And she said, he is going to climb Karen Tool.
All right.
And so my friend said to the guy, are you dressed like that going to climb? And he said, yeah, it's a pretty day and it's going to be great and all this. And he said, you can't go. I'm not going to let you. And the guy said, I can go. I can do what I want. And he said, I'm not letting you go. And they had an argument because this guy was going to climb the highest peak in shorts and a T-shirt.
Yeah.
And I've heard from people that it was gale force winds and raining one day when in Killarney we were sitting out in the sun enjoying the day. But up at the top, it was terrible.
This is happening like around the world. That you see people who are climbing in the flip flops and all that. They think like, it's like a walk. It's a park, right? It's a park. It's like, and then you're actually gonna deal with the elements. You're actually gonna deal with nature.
And then who has to go after them? Kerry Mountain Rescue. Or the Coast Guard or somebody. That's the problem. That's a problem. Somebody has to go rescue.
A little bit more about the mountain rescue. How does it? How if someone gets involved in that? Well,
I know they have training, classes. There's a lot of people in the group because you never know who's going to be around when they need to make a call. But I would say if somebody lived in Kerry and was interested in hill walking and mountain climbing, to be honest, most of them probably already know about it. Yeah. But they'd go to training classes and things like that. So
it's a little bit like a lifeboat.
Right, lifeboat for the mountain.
Lifeboat for the mountain.
Yeah, and I know there's one in Wicklow.
Okay.
And I assume that I would assume there's one up in Mayo for Krogpatrick and things like that. So if somebody gets lost, if somebody's missing, if somebody needs help, they call Kerry Mountain Rescue.
So I have another question for you about the mountains. Mm-hmm. You climb the mountain, right? You're struggling with all the bushes and vegetation and all that. And you're reaching like an elevated point. You look at that elevated point, and there's a sheep, looking at you, surprised, like, what that guy is doing?
This
here?
is my turf.
Yeah. So are these mountains used as a place just by farmers to?
Yeah, it's interesting. Some of them would have shared access, so they call it commonage.
All right. So you're right, because then we straight into the area who owns the land.
Yeah, a lot of it would be what they call commonage. So maybe 5 or 6 farms would own the hill,
Oh, really?
and they'd all have rights to that hill for grazing.
Oh,
Which is why you look at the sheep, and some of them have red spray paint on the top, and some have green, and some are blue.
These are mine. Blues
Yeah,
are mine.
it's so that a man told me, he said it's so you can get out at the bottom of the hill, pull up the binoculars, look up the hill, and know immediately which ones are yours.
Right.
And they share it, so they would separate them when it's time to.
But then the access to this land is like available to everyone. It's not like they're
No, they
private.
would own it. They would own it as a commonage. That's those farmers, and so it would not be public land.
Okay.
Now, something like the Kerry Way,
Yeah.
which is on private land. People seem to forget sometimes that the Kerry Way is actually on private land. They get a stipend from the government, just a little bit, to kind of
Allow the
people, but it also helps pay them to, because they're going to have to throw away trash, and they might have to fix up a fence and things like that. So some of the walks, the Kerry Way, which is an organized walk, the Dingle Way, which is some of those walks would have private property that they're crossing.
Okay. And like farmers don't mind if they have like a hill walker.
Well, you know how sometimes you'll see a hill walk if you look at a map, and it goes, ground, and all of a sudden you cut over, 20 yards, and you're on the road.
Yeah.
And then back on the ground again. That's because the person who owns that spot
farmer.
didn't want them walking on his land.
All right.
Yeah.
That's very interesting, because I thought that this is like a land that belongs to the state or something.
I mean, some of it say, I believe, Karen Tool, the highest point, I think, is public land, because I think it might be part of Killarney National Park. I don't know.
So for somebody who want to just go hill walking, what would you recommend? Should they pay attention to that, or should they just go ahead and go, or should they use some sort of a resource to
well, I think, like I
out?
mentioned, I think, finding a local guide, it's not expensive. It might save your life having somebody that knows, but also the local guides know the stories, and they know, I mean, you might walk right by a 500-year-old stone circle that has carvings in it, and look, because it just looks like another stone.
Yeah.
But a local guide would be able to stop and say, hey, let me show you this, and moves a little bit of ivy out of the way and shows you, a burial stone for someone. I think that's why a local guide would be a great resource.
Yeah, and certainly the history behind that, and all that. Well, look, that's fantastic. I didn't know. Tell us a little bit also about civil defense.
Oh, civil defense.
You mentioned that.
Yeah,
you
it's a
remember.
volunteer organization, and it's like similar to Coast Guard. Coast Guard is about saving people on the sea and water, and civil defense is about helping on land. So during a flood, like when they had the floods in Tralee,
I know
the civil defense helped make the sandbags.
Yeah,
and that sort of
things.
things.
Where were they? I didn't.
No, they were there.
Where were they? We were sandbagging ourselves, trying to save the office.
You needed a lot of sandbags. But civil defense is a volunteer organization. They have lots of fantastic training. So I've been trained in first aid, and one of my neighbors, she just got trained on how to get the license for a trailer, so she can tow a trailer behind a Jeep. And another course is starting this week. We're going to get more advanced first aid, so we'll be able to actually be on an ambulance.
Oh, wow.
So we can be, like one time I was actually in one of the ambulances that drove around at the racetrack.
Yeah.
So because they have to, any place you would have first aid, the Ring of Barra cycle, so that needed first aid. Horse races, they need first aid. Any of those kind of things. There's the civil defense.
What I'm getting from you is that everybody who's involved in outdoors and this sort of activities probably should give it a shot to at least one of these organizations and to
give back.
And exactly.
Just like if you're a person that runs races, if you're a person that runs all the 5Ks and the 10Ks, have you ever worked a water stop? Because none of those things happen without volunteers.
Yes.
And so if you're the kind of person that's out there every weekend
Or
running a
marshals
5K or whatever,
on the
be a
cycle.
volunteer one time and see what it's like on that side.
Yeah.
Don't just have the fun every weekend. Do some of the work too.
And are they have like in terms of civil defense or mountain rescue, they have like a phones that they're gonna ring and they say like, okay, this night I'm I'm carrying the phone essentially. If somebody needs me, they're gonna ring, anything like that.
Yeah, I would say that's
or is
probably
it just like a center where it coordinate everything?
Well, there is one civil defense center that then has all the different regions. So we would, we'd get a text message that says, well, a whole bunch of us were in a class, a first aid class.
Yeah.
And a text message came out to everybody pretty much that was in the room that said, flooding in Tralee, we need sandbags.
Right.
And
then
only the people, at that point, only the people that were in uniform could go.
Oh.
Because you have to be in uniform and the boots and the waterproofs and all the rest of the stuff. It was pouring down rain.
Okay.
And so a couple of us.
So you need to have a certain level of training.
And we have a uniform to wear and all the rest of the stuff. So.
All right.
And the training was great, the first aid training. I mean, we learned things like, one of the things I learned about that I didn't know anything about was what they call a crush injury. So if you're walking, like say you go on a hill walk and a boulder, fell and landed on someone's leg.
So it's like a blunt trauma.
Yeah, but it's different. So if someone's crushed by something and the crushing object is still on them, there's a limited amount of time.
So this is
that you can take it off.
What a crush is.
So
that's how it differs from blunt, because you have a like penetration trauma and blunt trauma.
Yeah, we learned all the different changes to that and what you would do for each one. Because one of the things that our teacher used to say, is where you are, the nearest ambulance could be 55 miles, 65 miles away. Because we have one ambulance in Kerry, which is 10 miles away. But if it's on a call and bringing someone to Tralee Hospital, that means our nearest ambulance is 65 miles away.
Yeah.
And so they train the first aiders, so just in case they might.
Would you generally discourage people on trying to go out walking on their own?
Well, I'd never would tell someone to go alone. I mean, even if they didn't need a guide, they should not go alone. Nobody should walk alone, because you can slip and fall. There's plenty of stories. There's a real famous trail runner in America, and his name is escaping me. But he used to run in the mountains of Mexico, very experienced. Yeah. And, he died on a run. Now, they don't know if it was just like the landslide came and knocked him off the, something small. But whatever it is, you still can hit your head. Yeah. And if you're by yourself, there's nobody else that can call when you're still alive but unconscious.
Yeah, you just scared me because I was doing that on my own.
Don't ever go out alone.
Well, it's so much more fun. I think you can kind of be...
But, find the right... partner, the one that doesn't necessarily have to gab the whole way. If you want to just have your silence, find someone else that likes that silence too. Yeah. Or you can use one of the tracking devices and you just send an email to somebody. But how does someone know you need help? If
you're not moving.
But they're gonna have to be watching you. So while they're drinking their cocktail that night, they're watching your little dot on their phone.
I don't know why it's not moving for the last half an hour.
I mean, a friend of mine was on a big cycle ride with a friend, and at the very end, they said, one guy said, "I'm going home," and the other one said, "Oh, I'm just going to do an extra 30." Yeah. So they split up. The guy who did his extra 30 was coming down a very, very, very steep hill. Yeah. And there was a speed bump. Yeah. It was unmarked. Yeah. And he hit the speed bump really fast and was by himself. They know what time it was because his watch stopped at the time that he had the accident. Oh, but a couple was having their morning coffee and sitting there, and the woman said she looked out the window and there was this bloody zombie walking up their driveway.
Oh, he was still walking.
But he was on semi-conscious. He doesn't remember anything. Right. And he walked up the driveway and they called 999, but he was very seriously injured. Wow. And they said they think he walked almost 3 miles to get to their house because it was the nearest house. Wow. He should have had someone with him. Yeah.
Are you never going alone on any walks or anything?
I mean, I do cycle back and forth to Killarney, but it's on a road. I wouldn't.
Is it not as dangerous or even more? You can get hit by a car.
Yeah, but I mean, I wouldn't ride the Ring of Kerry road at this time of year. I usually stick to, unless it's like 8 o'clock in the morning, I stick to the back roads. Yeah. I think it'd be unlikely to get hit by a car on the back roads because, people are keeping an eye out because they're looking for sheep. They might hit a sheep. So nobody's zooming around a turn because they don't want to hit a sheep. Yeah. And I wear bright colors, flashing light. I mean, I'm as one of my neighbors said, I'm lit up like a Christmas tree.
And that's the way to go. The way to go. So you wouldn't necessarily consider cycling in Ireland as dangerous on the roads,
No, my husband doesn't even know how to drive. He only cycles.
right?
So I think cycling is safe. Now, I also think that there's certain times a year and there's certain roads
Yes.
that may not be the safest
Yeah.
at certain times of day.
I think that what I would say is in the rush hours when the people are getting to or from work, they're kind of in their like a blinkers on, and I'm just gonna go here and there, and nothing matters. They're kind of in their own bubble from the office into the car, and kind of completely oblivious of everything.
And especially in the morning and in the night when they're coming back and forth, the sun is at the lowest point,
precisely,
right in their eyes.
Precisely, and I have a story. I don't remember if I already shared that on the podcast. And there is a guy who runs regularly the road from Tralee to Phoenix, and I he's there. I'm seeing him very often. And one day I was driving, and like you said, the sun is very low, and it just right, it's just in front of you, so you don't really see much. And this guy, he's not wearing anything, that will allow to be seen. And I noticed him the moment my review mirror was maybe, I don't know, 20 centimeters from him. I was terrified. I smashed the signal. I started honking, and just to kind of let him know, he probably thought I'm just an asshole, but I couldn't see him.
Yeah.
I just couldn't see him. I just noticed him the moment he almost broke off my review mirror. I said, Jesus, he should
Well, I was watching
someone behind you,
I was watching someone right in front of me the other day. I was on Dingle going around a circle.
Yeah.
And a guy on a bicycle was approaching the car. So the car was in the circle. So he was not moving, but the cyclist came up from behind, and then there was a drain. So the cyclist went in towards the car instead of just stopping and waiting so he could go through. He went in towards the car, but since it was a circle, the car was at an angle. So when he started moving forward, his back end, and I'll tell you, the guy, it was less than an inch.
Yeah. Be safe out there, folks.
It is.
Wear
safe.
reflective gear and. Okay, Suzanne. So we're gonna be wrapping this up. So
Great.
Just to finish off, for somebody who wanna visit Kerry, and how the ideal, maybe how the short trip and how the ideal trip should look like.
Well,
so
I would say
obviously it's ideally it's like coming back year after year after year, right?
And learning a place.
Yes, but
I think ideally the one thing I'd say, if someone said, hey, I want to come to Kerry, I'm flying in Ryanair into Farron for Kerry Airport, what should I do? The first thing I'd say is go into the hinterlands, into a village. Go beyond Killarney, beyond Tralee. No offense to you who lives in Tralee, but go into the smaller villages. Go into Anniscool on Dingle, or go into Killorglin or Glen Bay or Valentia Island. Go to the outskirts and really get to where every single village has good hill walks. They're not all famous, but trust me, they're all good.
Yeah.
There's some great hill walks. And there's actually a really cool one that I recommend outside of Kersavine that's a pilgrim path.
Right.
And it goes up the ridge of a mountain, so you can see, drop off one side goes towards the sea, the other side goes towards the mountains. The view is fantastic. There's crosses all the way up, the Stations of the Cross for Catholics.
Yeah.
And you can do the Stations up the Cross, and they've been there since the 1880s.
Wow.
And then at the very top, there's a white marble cross that's about 25 feet tall.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. And then 2 lakes behind it, looking down on it. It's just, the helicopter went by one day when we were there, and it was, everyone's looking in the sky, couldn't find the helicopter for the Coast Guard. It was below us. That's how high the hill was. And it's a pilgrim path called Knock na Dubber.
Right.
So you have to look that one up.
Great pronunciation. I could and obviously hire a guide.
Yeah, I think it's worth it. I really do. Bring a couple friends, and then split the cost.
What would be the resource to find on the internet to get more information outside, obviously, of your blog?
Oh, I'd say there's a. First of all, Go Kerry.
Yeah.
Is that Do you know that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Go Kerry And I think it's gokerry.ie.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. And so you mentioned to go outside Killarney and Tralee, and I don't know if you agree with that. I kind of feel like every kind of town which is like a hub for tourists, it kind of loses its climate. It becomes the same. It's all the same because it's meant for tourists, for travelers. So you have pubs and you have place to work and you have hotels, and so then you're not really seeing anything new. You see the same thing as everywhere else. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and another thing that's about going into a village or something like that, like there's an area called Drummond that's in the middle of the Iveragh Peninsula, in the middle of the Ring of Kerry. And there's actually a hostel. So when you're walking from Killarney on the Ring of Kerry and go through the Black Valley, which is gorgeous, and I've had one person tell me it's the prettiest thing they've ever seen, and someone else said it was the most depressing thing they've ever seen. So I think it depends on the weather. But Drummond Hostel, it's in the middle of the hill walking area, and there's not even really a village. It's just a tiny little hamlet, I guess.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of places that aren't big. You might not have live music 7 nights a week, but you're going to have spectacular community.
Yeah. And what do you think? Well, how would you recommend? What would be the ideal length of time to come to Kerry? Would it be a week or 2 weeks?
Well, I think it depends, because I know I talk to a lot of hill walkers that are doing the whole Kerry Way, and a lot of them say, I can't talk to you any longer. I'm too busy. I'm rushing from one bed and breakfast to the other. And they're trying to do the whole Kerry Way in about 8 days, 9 days, and they're rushing.
Right, which is not fun.
Yeah, the ones I've talked to who enjoy it the most are the ones that do half of it in a week.
All right.
And then they come back another year and do the other half.
Okay.
Yeah.
All come for 2 weeks.
Right.
Or 3 and have a break.
But not too many people have a 2-week break or a 3-week break.
Yeah.
But that's what I say. At least, you need days to really sport it. And another thing I like about it, especially if you stay in the same place, I tell people, the first night you go to the pub and everyone says hello. The second night you go to the same pub and everyone says, oh, you're back again. And then you say, well, yeah, I'm here for 3 nights. And they appreciate that there's someone staying and enjoying the area. And so then the third night when you go back to the pub, you're their friend.
You're the friend. Exactly. That's fantastic. So we thoroughly recommend visit Kerry.
Oh, yeah.
It's beautiful. Right?
And we have Kerry Airport. We've got trains from Dublin. There's a ferry that can take you here. There's
you
all
can
kinds
even take a flight from Dublin to Kerry Airport.
That's how I go when I go back to the States to visit family. I fly to Dublin Airport from here.
Yeah, exactly. They're like these flights are not necessarily great. They're more meant for business, right? So somebody have go to.
But I'd say anybody, should look at them.
I know that each time I try when I'm flying to Poland, it's always like, oh, no, it doesn't work. It's either arrive too late or something else. But yeah, if you're planning longer trip, then for sure. Yep. All right, Suzanne.
Well, thanks.
Any closing thoughts?
Well, I just think I have a little hashtag that I've sort of created on Instagram and Twitter. And it's hashtag never leave Kerry.
Never leave Kerry. There you go. So let's look for that and let's use that hashtag.
That's it. Come visit and use the hashtag.
Come visit and use the hashtag. Suzanne, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I guess one more quick thing.
There you go.
You're not made of sugar. You won't melt.
Yes.
Think of that when you're in the rain.
That's it.
That's what my Irish grandmother used to say.
Oh, yeah. And like my friend gone to Oman, right? And it was like, oh, beautiful weather and all that. And after a couple of weeks, or maybe was it month, we were posting photos from Ireland. And it's like, oh, really miserable weather, whatever. And he commented oh my God, there's rain. I'm missing rain. I miss rain. So great, Suzanne.
Oh, great. It was nice to meet you.
Thank you.
And I look forward to seeing you on a hill sometime.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.
Take care. Thanks.